Hello and welcome to A Miniatures Tavern. Now, Star Wars is a franchise that is very dear to my heart. I really loved it. I grew up watching it when I was small, and it's one of the first things aside from Star Trek that introduced me to the whole sci-fi genre of movies, books, series, animations, and stuff like that. And ever since then, I've loved anything that has to do with sci-fi. And that's how I also ended up reading Dune, which introduced me to Warhammer and introduced me to every other aspect of this hobby. But today I wanted to meld my two passions of Star Wars and the hobby together. And that is where this box comes in. Now, this box came out a while back. I'm not gonna review the contents of it. Most of you know it. I played. I really loved it. It's an amazing game. It's made by Fantasy Flight Games, but it was recently passed over to Atomic Mass Games. So if you're gonna be buying it, it's going to be from them now. They had the baton now, and they're gonna be releasing a bunch of cool new stuff. If you want to jump into it, it's pretty cool. And also, since the Star Wars community is so big, also you can get some from 3D sculpted minis. You can get them from many websites, including Etsy and stuff like that. And of course, the company is okay with it. At least that I know of, it's okay with it. I have a few that I bought from Etsy, and so I use it and I play with them. That's how I got like Ahsoka and stuff like that. But I'm not going to be reviewing the game itself. What I want to do, since I focus more on the lore, but the lore of Star Wars is just so vast, and there's other YouTubers already that do a much better job than what I do. So what I'm going to be doing is focusing more on the painting aspect, because like I said, I love Star Wars and I want to join those two passions together. And so this box is just so fun to paint, and honestly I recommend y'all to get some of these boxes if you're into Star Wars, and if you want to open your horizons to new other box sets. I definitely recommend you this. So hopefully if y'all pick it up, y'all like it as much as I did. It's going to contain a bunch of minis, stuff that you're gonna need to start your game. It's gonna contain already some terrain, so you can just use some of the sci-fi terrains that you're gonna have. So I will be showing you how I painted just one clone trooper, because honestly, their story, I picked up the Clone Wars because I love the whole lore behind the Clone Wars. If they ever release one for the Old Republic, definitely picking that up, but Clone Wars is my way to go because I love the story behind what is happening, the untold stories of the Clone Wars. So hopefully y'all like the video, and hopefully y'all find the painting cool. So I'll be painting in a Shadow Clone Trooper, and since I only have the Phase 1 helmets for now, that is going to be the helmet that I will be using. So hopefully you enjoy it. Now, when you get your box set, you're gonna have the General Grievous himself, of course, magnificent as always. These minis are highly detailed, and we have General Kenobi, as he always says is in the movies and the shows, with his pseudo-Russian accent. But these are highly amazing sculpts, kind of fidgety sometimes to glue, especially the clankers, the droids. But when it comes to Kenobi and General Grievous, they're pretty amazing. They're highly detailed, and the face that they used for Kenobi, I think is more based off the series and not really of Ewan McGregor. So, you know, putting that out there. But for General Grievous, you can have multiple poses for him. You can have him with his guns or just two hands. I decided to kind of add the 4 hands for him, so that way it can look more cool, because you know General Grievous has to be this imposing general for the clone army. And of course we get our clankers, the droids, which are pretty cool, detailed. Now are pretty hard to glue, but once they stick really hard, so that's pretty cool. And we have also the clone troopers. But today, like I said, I'm not gonna be painting my generals. General Kenobi and General Grievous are gonna have to wait. For now, I want to focus more on these two little fellers. We have, of course, the clankers, the droids, and we have my clone troopers with phase 1 helmets. Now for the droids, I decided that I'm going to go more for the Battle of Geonosis color scheme, so I decided to prime him black, so that way I can have a more darker shade of brown and reds when I decide to go ahead and paint my droid. And of course for the troopers, it's gonna have to be a white, unless of course you're gonna go for like one of those darker shades. But since it's easier to paint on white than it is on black when it comes to adding the white on top of the black, I decided to just go ahead and prime 3 of my guys into white. And of course my droids are going to be primed in black. But before all of that, of course I had to go through the process of thinking, because clone troopers, like I said, and kind of like stormtroopers, they're all in white. Their armor is just white all over. Of course you do have their logo, not their logos, but like their color schemes of whatever legion they come from. And you can have the 501st, of course, of Anakin Skywalker. And also you can have, of course, the color schemes from Commander Cody, the long forgotten Commander Cody, wherever you may be, Commander Cody, when it comes to the current canon. Hopefully you come up sometime. But like I said, it's just armor. And then when you think about it, there's also very much other different color schemes. You have the color schemes of the famous Commander Frodo from that animation I had mentioned earlier, that's what made us fall in love with the entire Clone Wars to begin with. Then you have the ARC Troopers, then you have your Commandos. This is Captain Frodo himself, of course, you know, the one and only. So I had to make sure that I wanted to go from that color to the color to transfer that into my painting scheme. And of course, like I said, I was gonna go for the Shadow Troopers, because I love darker colors. I love anything that has to do with shadows. So of course I was gonna go for Shadow Troopers. You're crazy. And of course I love the scheme. This is more of a phase 2 helmet, but I was trying to get the idea of how to paint this into my miniature. And of course I haven't tried my hand into freehanding the whole painting process, so these designs are going to be quite tricky to do. So of course my colors that I picked for my armor is going to be my scale color white, and of course my game color white from Vallejo. So what I was going to do is just going to go ahead and just first of all do the lines. If you're used to doing Space Marines, I'm not sure if this is how you do it, but this is how I recommend to do it. When you do Space Marines, I always color the inner parts of the Space Marines with black. That way when I go over it, I'm not gonna be messing up even more. And of course, like I've said in previous videos, I always like to work with things that are below. So I'm just going to be doing this all over my miniature. I'm just gonna get those recess areas out of the way right now. That way if I do make mistakes, they're gonna be very minor mistakes that I can fix later on. Because if I were to do this in the inverse, it was going to be a little bit more tougher to fix. And this is how the model came out at the end of just finishing doing those recess areas in just in black, and already it's looking quite great. I know I did a lot of outlines, I went really off, but that's fine. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and cover those areas with my white sands from scale 75, and I'm just gonna go ahead and do this all over my mini. That way what I'm doing here is basically just having a more of an off-white color of white. That way that can be act as my shadow already, so later on, because white is very tricky to do. So when I go ahead and did everything, as you can see, it's a white color, but it's not a very you know, super bright white. So that way when I put on my regular white, it's gonna create already a shadow in it, and it's just gonna have to be doing some blending and layering so you can have that easy transition from both of them. And of course, like I said, then I'm just gonna go with my white over it. I go ahead and poured it into my wet palette, and I'm just gonna go through the areas where the light should be hitting those spots, because like I said, this is armor, this is very shiny armor, so the areas that are going to be reflecting the light are going to be very white. And of course, white as it is, it's a very tough color to do shading on. That's why I decided to do it the inverse, just adding that. But when I realized afterwards that actually I did not need to do this in the end, because my guy is mainly going to be covered in black, I decided that it was basically pointless at the very end of this day. But I decided to keep this part for y'all. If you wanted to go ahead and do this kind of idea, is just to start off with an off-white and then go with your bright, just regular white color in the end, and then just to make an easy smooth gradient transition between the two colors, just try to do some wet blending towards the end, so you can have a nice smooth already color of armor already. So it's gonna be shiny, you're gonna have your shadows already in it. It's just gonna be the case of doing the whole grading of a brighter white to that off-white color. And honestly, if I were to just wanted to have just a regular clone trooper, I would have been quite happy with just this. Like I said, you just do your trying to do some wet blending to do your a better smooth of a gradient, and it will look quite great. Honestly, you're gonna have your shadows already in there, and it's gonna be quite cool already. So if you want to try out this topic, I decided to just leave this part of the video in it. But like I said, my guy is going to be mainly covered in black, so of course I have to be very careful. Like I said, this is my first time trying out this freehand, where I'm supposed to do designs on it, so I have to do very straight lines when it comes to diagonal, and I have to really think about how I'm going to position my guy, how I'm going to position these lines, because as it is shown in the video, in the image, he has some very diagonal lines when it comes to the chest and the legs and the thighs. So once you get that line that I wanted to, now it's just a question of just adding it all over. And of course I'm gonna do this for the rest of his body. His other leg is going to be the same, it's just going to be the inverse of the line. But of course this is how I was going to do it, and of course I'm going to be showing you a little bit more of the stuff that I did, because like I said, there's a lot of diagonal lines when it comes to this painting scheme, and something of course new to me. And you just have to be very careful in whatever brush you're using. Try to use something that you're very comfortable in using, that you're not gonna mess up. Here I'm just using my regular Games Workshop brush, the one that is for shading, and I use that one for this intricate parts. I haven't invested yet for one of those fancy brushes yet, but I'm very comfortable using those and creating some lines. Even if I do mess up a little bit, I know that when I start doing more detail work, I know I'm going to be able to fix it. But my point is, just try to be careful once you're doing this. You just kind of have to think about it and be patient, take your time. If you mess up, it's fine, you can just go ahead and redo it. I know black is a little bit tricky, a little bit more tricky to cover, but it's going to be fine. And now the process of the rest of the mini was just to go ahead and do the back area. The back area, I could not for the life of me find any photos or any images of showing them the back, so this is more of a me thinking how it should look like in the back. So this is not very lore accurate or canon accurate armor when it comes to the back plate, but that is what I decided to do. The chest plate also is one of those areas where it's gonna have to be some very delicate work. Now, like I said, you just have to take your time. Don't worry if you mess up. I know I messed up a little bit, but you just have to be careful. Like I said, get one of your best brushes that you're more comfortable using, and you'll do fine. And it's fine if you mess up. I mean, if you're gonna go for a tabletop ready, it shouldn't matter at that point. But once you're done, once I was done with my mini, and this is how he ended up looking, I decided to do his helmet as well, of course. But honestly, I'm quite proud of it. My lines could be a little bit more straight, but that's something I'm working on still. But honestly, for the first time that you're gonna do it, you're gonna mess up, so that's fine. That's now what I'm going to do now is get his visor part. So what I did is I got some corn red from Games Workshop, and I go ahead and did put that on his visor, because for the Shadow Troopers their visor is red. So I decided to just go ahead and did that. And what I did afterwards is, like I said, clone troopers are very shiny, their armor is very shiny, so I had to think about exactly how I was going to add those colors to my miniature. So what I did is I just got my regular white, and I go ahead and did some blending with my corn red, and I just go ahead and put it just in the very bottom of the visor, not the higher part where the eyes usually are. It's more like where the nose area, that is the sole area that I decided to put some lighter and lighter areas of my mix of red and white. That way it can give you that feeling that light is coming, like light is reflecting out of it, so it should look a little bit more natural than normally one would leave it. Because you can just say that you can just paint it all red and just claim that it's ready to go, because it really is. It's just me wanting to add some details to it. Now I'm quite proud of how the visor came out, and this is how he looks already with his visor already painted. And like I said, if you were not going to go for details, he is already looking pretty great. I'm actually quite proud of it as how he is right now, but I want to go for details, of course. So I decided to go and add this Mechanica standard gray with some black, because now what I'm going to do is going to be creating that reflecting light of the black. Now this is the first time that I'm also doing it myself, so what I did some stippling on his helmet and in sub areas where I needed to be a little bit careful in how I was going to implement my shading. So I started off with a lighter shade of mix of black and gray, so that way I can start off with starting to make that black pop up, because like I said, and I know I'm gonna be repeating myself a lot, but clone armor is very shiny. So in the very end you're gonna end up with like a very light gray. It's not gonna be white, because since it's reflecting out of a black colored reflection, it's not gonna be very white. It's just gonna be more like a very light gray. So what I did is I go ahead and put my entire grays, my lighter shade of black, I want to call it, or a darker shade of gray, into the areas where I think, and that is the key word, is that whenever you are going to be doing this, is wherever you think you feel that your light source is coming from. So for me, my light source is coming from the top, so I'm only going to be putting that shade into the areas where I personally think that light should be reflecting off. So I'm getting his legs, just the side of his legs, not his entirety of his legs, it's just the side, part of his thigh, shoulder area, of course some parts of the back. And what I'm doing now is I'm just going to be adding lighter and lighter shades of black, or blacker shades of gray, whatever, however you want to think about it. If you're a half full kind of guy, or a glass half empty kind of guy, depending on how you want to see it. But for me, it's more a lighter shade of black. But so I'm just applying it more and more into areas, into smaller areas. So that's basically how your layering technique works. It's just you're going to be implementing lighter and lighter shades of whatever color you decided to do in smaller and smaller areas. That way in the end you're gonna end up with something that is gonna look like it's popping up. And of course, like I said, since he is a clone trooper, this is going to be a very shiny armor. So I'm gonna go with very brighter and brighter colors, so his armor is going to feel like it's reflecting off. So for now, I'm just going to be working around his helmet, around his shoulders, and like I said, I'm going to go with smaller and smaller areas to cover. I'm not gonna go through everything all over again. It's just smaller and smaller, to the point that in the end you're gonna end up just stippling just little small areas, because that is how when you see cars, that the sun is reflecting off of cars, it doesn't hit everything, or like certain areas, like you see that once you get to the center of the light source, it looks even brighter. So that is exactly basically the concept that I'm going for. I'm thinking of it as if it's a light reflecting off a car. So when I was done with it, this is how it looked like, and honestly I'm very proud of how he is turning out to be. His light source is quite where I wanted him to be, and so the light parts are coming off how I wanted it. And now what I'm going to do is just gonna add a little bit of weathering, because you know, he's a clone trooper, he's been in battles, he has had a hard life. So when you think of a clone trooper, he's been around battles and stuff like that, so his armor is going to be chipped. He's not going to be changing armors all the time. So I'm just going to go all over his area, his knees, especially his legs. Of course, when you're running and stuff like that, you're going to have a bunch of chipping in your armor and stuff like that. So that is essentially the concept that I went with. That is more to adding more personality to the guy. Now this is something that I decided to come up with at the very end, in the spot, is that I got one of my contrast paints, the Leviathan Blue, and I decided to put Leviathan Blue in all the areas that are like deep recessed areas of my clone armor, because blue, like a dark blue, is very good way of adding shade to a black, and this will also separate the black from itself, because if you leave it all black, it's kind of hard to tell where something ends. So what I decided to do is just add some blue, that way you can have a little definition between where like his the back of his knee ends, his pouches end. So I decided to just add this to where areas where I think shade should be even darker. So I just went with this Leviathan Blue, and of course, since it's a contrast paint, it's a transparent paint, well, a semi-transparent paint, so it's gonna keep that blackness of the black plus adding the pigments of the blue. So it's gonna come off pretty great. So if you're ever painting black, I honestly do recommend you adding some blue, or some sort of, like, if you do some glazing of some blue or anything that is like really dark, so you can just add a little bit more shade to it, just to make it a little bit more interesting. So that is what I decided to do with him, is just add that Leviathan Blue. And this is how it turned out to be once I added my Leviathan Blue in every single area where I thought that shading should be even more darker. So of course, behind the knees, behind the thigh, that little gap area he has in the back, under his back arm, the back plate and stuff like that. And the finishing touches was to go ahead and color his gun, the famous DC-15A blaster rifle. So what I'm just going to do is gonna get again that same blend, the lighter version of the same blend that I had, that Mechanicus gray and black, so I can have a little bit of differentiation. I do not want to color his gun black, then it's gonna be just too much black, and I'm just gonna end it off with adding that lighter shade of gray. At this point, it's just a lighter shade of gray. It's more turning to white, so it can have more details to it. You can have some more depth to the weapon. So you're just getting, so you're basically doing some edge highlighting, which is basically what I'm doing, just edge highlighting, just all the edges, making it wider and wider, so it can also give it that mechanical look of the gun. And so by adding a little more details, this gun is coming out alive in itself, and honestly, it is looking quite great. Afterwards, once the gun was done, I decided to just let it sit for about a day so the paint could just set in well, and everything could just end up really well. And now this is how it turned out to be. Now, like I said, this is a very exciting painting to do, because honestly, I love the Star Wars universe. I love how this model turned out to be. These models are just a dream to paint on. I took the paint really well, and letting it sit for one day was the best call I've ever done when it comes to one of my paintings. Usually I take a picture right away when I'm done, so I should be doing that more often. And honestly, I love the way the shading came out. This is my first time actually trying out this technique of trying to think of light sources and thinking where to place stuff like that. Usually I do more always one specific area, but this time I was more methodical in the way I did it, and adding some terrain to it. Of course, it's always the best thing to do, but honestly, I really love doing this. And if you're looking for other tabletop games to play, and you want to get out of the Games Workshop kind of comfort level, Star Wars Legions is one of the games I highly recommend you trying out. And also, if you love painting, it's gonna be so much fun to paint.